I'm Dr. Jill Johnson. I've spent my entire career in education. I started in the classroom, then trained teachers, and most recently served as a high school administrator. Now I help highlight the stories, struggles, and successes in educating the next generation of content creators. Welcome to CGTV.
I'm going to get to why they invited this slightly sketchy looking skater dude up here to talk to you today. And so we're going to get to this quickly, and this is the way that I'm going to do this. I'm going to talk for like 10 or 15 minutes, and then we're going to talk about storytelling after that. Cool? Everybody get it? If you weren't cool with it, I don't know what I'd tell you. Just get out or something. But we're going to get going. And so my name's Mike Smith. I grew up in Imperial. I don't know if any of you are 308ers in here, but I still have a 308 cell phone number. So I grew up in one of those towns with no stoplight, way out west. Everybody played all four sports. I did all those things. My birthday's in April, so I turned 18 like a month before we graduated. And it was when I turned 18, that moment finally hit, and I went to my school counselor, and I was like, I should figure out what I'm going to do after I graduate. And so I panicked. Don't let my looks fool you. I didn't crush it academically. And so I rolled into her office with an 18 on my ACT and a 2.0 GPA. And so I always remind everybody that C's get degrees. Don't forget that. And so I roll in. I'm basically, oh yeah, I can steal the clicker. Yeah, I roll in to my counselor's office, and I'm kind of freaking out. I don't know what I want to do. The night before, I saw this documentary on smoke jumpers. These are dudes who jump out of helicopters to fight forest fires from the inside. So I go rolling into her office, and I'm like, I want to be a smoke jumper. Like, I want to fight forest fires. And she looks at me, and she's like, this is western Nebraska. What forest are you talking about? Like, where are you going to do this? And then she said, instead of thinking about what job you want, she was like, why don't you answer this question? And this is the question I want to pose to you. It's a very simple one. It's not what career do you want. It's not what degree you think you're going to get in college. It's none of that. The question I have for you is, who do you want to be next? And here's why I ask this question so often. You're going to change your identity. I know you don't think so because you're kind of wrapped up in this sort of like me world that you're living in now, but you're going to change your identity 4 or 5 times in the next 10 years and you don't even realize it. Some of you are athletes and that's your identity. But you're small-town Nebraska kids, and unless you go pay to play in college, sports ends for a lot of you when you graduate high school. For most of you, even the pay-to-play kids, you're not going to make it all the way to the 4 years getting done playing sports there either. And so after that, your sports identity changes. A lot of you are going to say, I'm from this small town. Then you're going to move to a big city, and you're going to introduce yourself like you're from that small town. But then you're going to leave Lincoln or Omaha, and you're going to move to another state. And you're not going to tell people you're from a small town anymore because they don't care. You're just going to say, I'm from Nebraska. And they'll say, oh, I'm from this state. And your identity is going to change again and again and again. And that's how it's going to continue to happen. So when she asked me this question of, who do you want to be next? I had 0 good answers. So I said, I just want to have fun and help people. And she said, maybe you should work with kids. So I listened. I enrolled in this school that had some youth program. I got kicked out at Thanksgiving, had to go back home, work on the farm for a couple more months. Got into another college at Christmas time, and I got in because I could play basketball. And the reason that I went there was because they had low academic standards and they let your boy in. And so I walked in that first day, I shook my coach's hand, and he was like, I know our reputation. He was like, there to change it. And he's like, I take academics really serious. He's like, what do you want to study? What do you want to major? And I looked at my coach and I was like, I don't know, man, like, I just want to help people. And he looked at me and said, if you just want to help people, get in my truck. And I looked at him and I was like, my mom has warned me about people like you my whole life. I was like, I'm not getting in that truck. But this is Coach, so you do what Coach says. So I hopped in this truck, and we drove to downtown. We drove to the 10th Street Bridge in Omaha. If any of you are from Omaha, it looked very different 20 years ago than it does today. We pulled up to the 10th Street Bridge. He parked. He said, get out and walk. We walked to the top of the 10th Street Bridge. He looked at me, and he was like, Smith, if you want to help people so bad, he was like, why don't you help them? And he pointed over the railing of this bridge. I looked over the railing of this bridge, and living underneath that bridge was like hundreds of homeless people. There are more homeless people living underneath that bridge than I had in my graduating class. And I'm looking at these people, looking at Coach, and I'm like, what do you expect me to do about this? And he's like, if you want to help people so bad, why don't we start with them? So we walked back down the bridge. He pointed to a trail and said, follow that all the way to the end, and you're going to find exactly what you're looking for. But he said, you're a man. You got to do this one on your own. And he walked off. I'd been in college for like a half an hour at this point. I was like, all right. So I walk under this bridge, I make my way down this trail, and the first dude I saw, I just put my hand out, and I seriously was just like, my name's Mike. Shook this guy's hand and was like, I go to school like right up the hill, how can I help? And this dude told me everything. He told me his name and his story and where he was from and why he was homeless and what happened to his family. He was like a vet, served, lost everything, got addicted to drugs. Like, he just told me his whole story, and then he finally looked at me and was like, you know what I need? And he was like, I need socks. And I didn't get it. I'm like, what you talking about socks for? And what he explained to me is that socks are the most requested, least donated thing in a homeless shelter, and the average amount of days that someone living outside wears the same pair of socks is for 30 days. I want you to picture that. Picture rocking the same pair of socks you got on now just for the next 30 days. That's a small example of what it's like to live outside. This dude showed me his feet, and I was like, no. I was like, I can do something about this. I was like, you need socks? I'll be right back. So I walked up to campus, and the coolest part about playing sports in college is you get free stuff. So I walked into the equipment room, I found a brand new box of Adidas tube socks for the girls' volleyball team, and I was like, yo, they're free, right? Like, I don't even care. And I took those socks, I made my way back down to that bridge. Coach saw me, and he's like, where are you taking those? And I was like, I'm helping people. Like, I got you. And I made my way down, and honestly, that day, they lined up, I started passing out tube socks, and from that moment on, something changed inside of me. That's just kind of who I became. And this is pre-social media. You guys got to realize this is before there was like a hashtag, before we took selfies, before we filmed ourselves doing it, before everybody got volunteer hours to graduate, before our youth pastor made us show up in matching t-shirts, and then we all went and ate pizza afterwards. There was none of that. There was just a dude walking under a bridge trying to convince people to go with him, and I spent 4 years marching underneath that bridge. Got done doing that, worked really hard at basketball, dreamed about winning and playing in a national championship. Our little school made it to a national championship. We didn't win. I did get the game-winning shot hit in my face, though, and if that happens to you, that lights a whole different kind of fire inside of you. And so after that went down, I dropped out of school literally the next day, got on another team, and went to go play basketball in another country to make up for what had just happened. Made it 2 weeks, rolled my ankle so bad I had to come home, but I'd already dropped out of school, so I got to watch all of my classmates graduate when I was supposed to graduate, and instead of throwing myself a pity party, I just started applying for jobs. And most applications back then said 1 year, 2 years, 4 years, some years, like not a lot of them said degree, and so I always just checked the 4-year box and dealt with the details later. And so I started getting a lot of jobs that I wasn't qualified for, but I talked my way in. And I landed myself a job as the director of street outreach and homeless outreach services here in Lincoln, working with runaway homeless teenagers. So I was trying to help kids who were chronically homeless get off the street and have a shot at a real life. And when I did that, I was the judge of teen court. So I had to listen to kids your age tell me, I'm not gonna make you raise your hand, but you all probably have that friend, you're all good kids, you all probably have that friend who maybe they got like an MIP or a trespassing ticket or something on their record and they had to do some community service hours to get it gone and nobody wants to talk about it, but we all know that it happened. Yeah, so some of you know exactly what I'm talking about. This is Nebraska, we just sweep it under the rug until it gets really big. But what my job was to do is I was supposed to work with these kids and come up with the volunteer hours that they had to do to get it off of their record. And I realized something very quickly about Nebraska teens while doing this work. And it's that you all are terrible at crime. Like, there's no other way around it. Our kids get away with nothing. They always tell on themselves. We're all too nice. And so I was like, okay, Nebraska kids aren't bad. They're just bored. Any of you relate to saying, oh, I'm from Nebraska, there's nothing to do? Any of you ever said that before? For sure. Well, I grew up in the 308. I'm from the capital of nothing to do. And when I realized that we weren't bad, we were just bored, I was like, that's a problem I can solve. I want to say this because I say this often. A lot of times adults give you really bad advice, your parents give you really bad advice, and so I'm going to help you not take some really bad advice. People are going to tell you often to follow your passion. I'm going to be one of those dudes that tells you that's actually really bad advice, and here's why. Passion's not a starting point. You can't be, nobody walks into my spaces and says, Mike, I'm passionate about this. You don't start like that. You start with curiosity, then you get really good, then you get obsessed, then it turns into a passion. Some of you have a passion today that you're gonna drop the minute you find something else. The thing you actually need to look for is a problem you're really excited to solve, because that's what work is. You don't wake up every day and do your hobby. You wake up every day and solve problems. So when I found out Nebraska kids weren't bad, they were bored, as quick as I could, I haven't touched a basketball since this day. I Googled how to start a nonprofit. I tore down an abandoned barn by Blair, and I built the world's first ever nonprofit indoor skate park, and we put this place in the mall here in Lincoln. You know that indoor bowling alley at our mall now in Lincoln? There was a skate park here in 2010. I don't know if even all of you in this room were alive in 2010, but I built this in 2010, and when we opened our doors, We had to stay open when the mall was open, and I couldn't be open late enough, and kids were still getting in trouble, but they started watching me. They'd see me skate around Lincoln handing out socks and beanies and bottles of water to people, so kids asked if they could show up. So I just let them show up. So 2 kids showed up, 5 kids showed up, and all of a sudden I got kids as young as 5 years old showing up to go skate and give socks and beanies and bottles of water to people in Lincoln experiencing homelessness. And this grew from Lincoln to Omaha to Kansas City, then the internet got it, and then it started in Seattle, then it happened in other countries. And I've spent the last 14 years of my life flying all across the planet, getting to give out socks and bottles of water, millions of socks, millions of bottles of water to people all across the world. We do massive Socktober drives right before winter to go fill up homeless shelters before it gets cold. I've worked with some of the biggest brands in the world to give socks away to people all across the country, all across the globe, honestly. And from our space, kids wanted more. They wanted to be open later. They started asking about high schools. And so we got out of the mall, and now today our space looks like this. It's a massive youth warehouse. It's home to a world-class skate park. There's recording studios, concert venues, coffee shops. There's this just gigantic dynamic youth space that's open till late on weekends so kids have a place to go. And 2 years ago, we turned this into a public high school. So kids go to high school here now. It's for juniors and seniors, and you can graduate from Bay High. For all of you teachers in here that are curious about it, just go to lps.org, and you can go look up Bay High for yourself. But this is a focus program here in Lincoln, and we're taking everything that we've learned from this place, and we're doing it in Omaha. We're about to open up another facility in Omaha, right in the heart of Benson. It's twice the size of this warehouse. It's going to have the same exact facilities and amenities. And this is the stuff that we're up to every single day of our life, is creating a space like this. And what we're turning kids into is storytellers, content creators. It's the marketing generation. It's the innovative generation. These are the kids who are growing up with cameras and computers in their hands, but they're also the ones shaping and pushing culture. So we're teaching them how to do that. And so, for me, the whole point of that, how long was that? 10 minutes, exactly. And so this is a storytelling conference, right? So everybody take a deep breath. There was 10 minutes of a little Mike Smith blitz on stories. Everybody good? So here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna share with you how I just did what I just did. Is that cool? Did you all feel the room stop and change and shift, and people that weren't looking started looking, and then people that weren't paying attention started paying attention? I even had like somebody listening to music, something going off the entire time over here while I was talking. Did you guys notice how a room can shift just by hearing someone tell a story? It does, and it can. And so everything I just did right there is 100% on purpose with a strategy, and I'm gonna share with you how I did it. And the first thing I did was I just started with one powerful question, which was, who do you wanna be next? That was it. A lot of us think when we tell a story, we have to start by being a hero and making it about us. We don't. Sometimes we can start with one powerful question. But all great stories, in my opinion, have one thing in common, and it's very, very simple, and it's that there's a journey to it. But here's the way that this journey works. If you want to be a great storyteller, whether you're doing it on social media, whether you're going to be a professional speaker, whether you're going to write and create movies someday, whether you're just trying to be really good at telling your story to get a job, whatever it is, there's a storytelling checklist. So I teach a storytelling class. I try to show people how to shape and craft their own story. And this is the way I think about every speech, every story, anything I give, I think about it in one simple way. I asked yesterday, I was like, Jill, how long do I have? And she said 30 minutes. And most people might think like, oh, you have to tell a 30-minute story. That's not how I think about things. Sometimes I get asked to speak for 3 hours. Sometimes I get asked to speak for an hour. Sometimes there's 3 hours in front of 3,000 people or 1 hour in front of 10,000 people. I've been asked to do all different types of storytelling experiences or opportunities, but I do the exact same thing, not the exact same story. I do the same structure every time. So here's the way that I structure my stories, and here's a really simple way to structure yours. If you're an introvert in here and you hate talking about yourself, today is specifically built for you. Like, this is how you get better at it. And so what I did for the last 10 minutes when I spoke is I didn't tell you one story. I told you 3 or 4 short stories. Can anybody remember the 3 or 4 short stories I told? I just told them. Someone raise your hand. Go ahead, bud. College basketball, there's one. What else? Go ahead. A little bit about how I grew up. What else? Does anybody remember yeah, go ahead. Socks to the homeless, right? What else? Help people. What did you say over here? What I'm doing now, exactly. What am I doing now? Speaking. What do I do now? Just say it out loud. Everybody at once, say it out loud. Does anybody even know? Nobody has a clue. No, that's the whole point. I didn't tell that part. That's why nobody knows. So there's a structure to storytelling. I'm going to explain something to you really quickly about it. I'm going to go to this slide real fast before we get to storytelling. There's this thing in storytelling called the peak end theory, and this is a really big thing. I'll use this example, like if you're going to a concert or if you're watching a movie. Has anybody ever been to a concert before? It's incredible, you love every minute of it, and then at the very end they blow it, and you're like, oh, it ruined the whole thing. Let's say you watch a movie series, you binge watch something on Netflix. I know a bunch of people, not like us, or didn't ask for this, or whatever that love rom-com that just came out. What is it called? Nobody wants this, right? It's like the one that hit everybody, but the end's controversial. People are like, is this the end I want? Did I love the end? Did I hate the end? And if you don't love the end, people will say it ruined the whole thing, but the truth is, it didn't ruin the whole thing. The end might have been a 2-minute thing, and the way that it ended didn't ruin the obsession everybody had to get to the end. What it actually ruined wasn't the experience, it ruined the memory of it. And here's where Gen Z and Gen Alpha is deeply struggling to find themselves. Here's why your generation is starting to turn out lost and starting to not know this, I don't know what I'm passionate about. It's not because you don't have access to things, it's because you're differentiating and confusing the difference between an experience and a memory, and some of you just want to tell the story so bad that you're actually missing the opportunity to live the story for itself. This is one of the most historic shots in sports of all time. LeBron James breaking a scoring record. This one cracks me up. I always laugh at the guy posting up that no one's ever going to remember his name, like, hey, throw it to me. Like, yeah, right. And so this cracks me up. Look at the phones. If you look around, you can see the phones. You can see how crazy this is. But there's something about this story that's actually really, really incredible. When they zoom all the way in, what you realize is there's Phil Knight, co-founder and CEO of Nike for 52 years, sitting next to LeBron James's 2 kids, surrounded by his loved ones, and what's he doing? He's just watching. CEO of Nike, look how much Nike's in this photo, by the way. LeBron's team, the other team, Nike's everywhere in this photo. 52 years, this dude was the CEO of Nike. He was a co-founder of Nike. This isn't the biggest moment in his life. It's the biggest moment in LeBron's life, but it's not the biggest moment in his life. This guy's, he's the CEO of Nike. They've sponsored the top athletes in every sport, and he did it for 52 years. LeBron's not even arguably the biggest athlete he's ever had. There are global phenomenons who've sold more shoes than LeBron has. Jordan sold more shoes than LeBron. Who inspired LeBron? Who put Jordan in the Nikes? Like, who did all of these things? Well, it was that guy right there. So the question you have to ask yourself, if we go back to this photo, is more often than not, we think that this is where the power comes in, which is true, but this guy's the one who created the story. He's the one who put the shoes on that dude's feet and gave him access to do the whole thing. And more often than not, we don't pay attention to who's actually telling the story and why. We just get sucked up in it, and that's what the best stories can do to us. They have a very, very strong start, they have a really cool experience in the middle, and they have a really strong end. So the peak end theory goes like this. Nobody remembers a whole movie. Nobody remembers a whole concert. Nobody even remembers just 10 minutes of Mike talking. All you remember is the start, where he made fun of himself for being a sketchy-looking, homeless-looking skater dude. You remember the end, where he talks about his school, and then the third part is subjective. You just remember your favorite part. And everybody's favorite part might be different. For some of you, it might be giving out socks. For some of you, it might be the part about the skate park. For some of you, it might be the thing in the mall. Everybody has, maybe it's starting my own public high school. We all have a different thing that we find is the best part in the middle. And when you're telling a story, your job is to have an incredible start, an incredible finish, and then you have to create a bunch of different touch points along the way to create a meaningful story in the end. And so the way that I structure my stories is really simple. The first thing is you can't be the hero. The amount of people that come up to me and say they want to be a motivational speaker, and then I say why, and they say, oh, because my story is so impactful, I just want to tell it, and then I turn around and tell them, you're not going to be a successful motivational speaker. You're just not. And the reason why is we're all the hero in our own story. That role is already taken. When a motivational speaker comes up to talk, oftentimes they try to be the hero in the story. We stop listening to them, and we don't pay attention. So I'll go back to my story. Was I the hero in the socks story, or was my coach and other people showing me how to get there the hero? I was just a kid who didn't know what to do, and somebody showed me the way. The same thing was true in college. Did I say I got perfect grades and I mastered everything and got straight A's and worked really hard and got into the best school so I could get into the best college? Absolutely not. Did I start my speech off by telling you guys that I'm Stanford certified? Did I start off by telling you I started my own high school? Did I start off by telling you that I'm an award-winning entrepreneur? No, I don't mention those things. I don't put them in my intro either because I don't want to be the hero. But most of us, when we introduce ourselves, we start off as the hero. The truth is, the best storytellers, they're a guide, not a hero. So if you're telling your school's story and you want to do a great job, it can't be about you holding the camera or you writing the words. It's got to be about who you're covering. You're just a guide, they're the hero. The next thing I want to touch on is you have to make them think about themselves. They can't think about you. When I would get done speaking, most people would come up to me and ask if they could give away socks in their town. That tells me that they're thinking about their community and what they can do, not what I can do. And so the most important thing you can do when you talk is get the audience to think about themselves, not you. The third one is be culturally relevant. I could have stood up here and told you guys 1,000 stories about what CEO life is like for Mike or what storytelling is like. I could tell you what it's like to be sponsored by Red Bull or Vans or Liquid Death or GoPro, but those stories aren't culturally relevant to you because none of you are experiencing those things. But I tell stories about deciding where to go after high school or trying to decide what to do while in college because that's something you can all understand. And then make them laugh. That's the fourth one. Most of you think you're not funny, and it's true, you're not. And so what you have to do is you have to find your version of funny. And the way that you get there is really simple. Follow a comedian who talks like you. Make fun of yourself. Make fun of the person next to you if they're okay with it. Most of us don't want to go talk in front of people because we're terrified of standing up here and it just being empty space, and I understand that that's a big fear. But if you learn how to structure a story really well, you're not up here talking about yourself. You're up here actually just guiding an experience. And so, if we're here because storytelling is the goal, the question I have for you is, what is your storytelling view? So I want you to write these answers down. Actually, just have this conversation at your table for the next 2 minutes. There's 5 questions up there. Answer as many of these questions as you can with the person next to you, but I want you to have a conversation just about storytelling. Some of you start at the top, some of you start at the bottom, some of you start at the middle, but just have this conversation for 2 minutes. So here's a very interesting way to think about storytelling next. To answer the question, no, I'm not a professional speaker. I just do it sometimes on the side because it's the greatest side hustle of all time. I run the Bay day to day, and I work there day to day, and that's my actual job. But for a season, I was a professional storyteller, and that's what I did. And people would ask me the same question all the time. And my favorite question that people often like to ask me is this question around, what do you make? People always ask, Mike, what do you make? Like, you speak, you spoke, you run the Bay, you do this nonprofit thing, like you have brand deals. People always ask this idea around compensation, but I don't think people understand that we all are wired differently. And so the way that we like to be compensated for our time is actually very different. Not all of us are driven to make money. Not all of us are driven to make an impact. And the third way that people like to be paid is an expression. Some of you are just insanely creative. You love to be in some sort of Adobe software going crazy, building out some sort of template or editing something for hours and hours and hours. You get really excited about being unique and different. 100 people go this way, you want to go that way. That's what expression is. And so there's this idea of how do we want to be paid? This works in life, this works in everything. And so the question I have for you today is, think about you as a storyteller right now. Some of you are like, I'm just doing this for school because I have to be. Some of you are telling your story on social media because you want to get somewhere. Some of you do it because it's fun or it's funny with your friends. But we all tell a story for a different reason. See where it says money? For some of you, you could replace money for grades. You're not getting paid to do this. You're just getting a grade to do this. And so if you think about this like a soundboard, like that's mid, treble, and bass, my question for you would be is, why are you telling stories? He brought up some friends of mine. They're called the Bowie Boys. They make TikTok videos. I'm too old for TikTok. I'm in my 40s. The Bowie Boys are kids. So they've literally grown up at the Bay making these videos. They want to get paid, but I can promise you money on their TikToks, it's dang near at the bottom. Impact? They're maybe impacting themselves. They're impacting certain people, but what they're actually doing is it's fun. It's entertainment. They want it to be a job. It's a career for them. So they've gotten really, really good at telling skate stories or really, really good at telling stories at the Bay or really, really good at telling funny stories. They're not saving people's lives. They might not be changing the world with it, but it's their content. A motivational speaker who overcame something. Maybe they get paid a lot. Maybe they make a ton of impact. Maybe it's a really expressive thing. When I was a motivational speaker, I seriously flew like 250 days a year. I've spoken in every single state. I've been to like 50 countries to speak. If you're gonna do something like that, money was at the top. Impact was at the top. Expression was at the top. But if that's a song, if you take mid, treble, and bass and you floor it all the way up, that's a terrible song. And that was a terrible mix for me. So I stopped doing that and started doing other things. So the question I have for you is, think about your mix And what do you want to make? If somebody asked you, what do you want to make in life? Do you want to make money? Do you want to make a difference? Do you want to make a creative difference in this world? Money, impact, expression. I want you to make a little chart that looks like that. Where is money for you? Is it all the way at the top? Is it all the way at the bottom? Where's impact for you? Is it all the way at the top? Is it all the way at the bottom? Where's being a creative person? Is it all the way at the top? Is it all the way at the bottom? And I want to say this really quickly. There's nothing wrong with, sometimes people get really weird about money. Let me explain two versions of it. I have best friends whose parents worked the worst blue-collar jobs and you could imagine so that their kids could go to school. Those kids went to school, law school, flipped their family tree. They make a ton of money and now they take care of their parents. And so their whole drive was to have a life better than the one that their parents fought for them. That's totally fine. Some of you, your parents already did that. They already made a ton of money, so you don't have to worry about that. You get to go make an impact, or you get to go make a creative expression. There's no right, there's no wrong. We're all just living our existences. And so think about yours real quick, but I want you to make your mix. What do you want your storytelling mix to be? How much money do you want to make? How much impact do you want to make? And how much creative expression do you want to make? Take a second, make your little mix, and then explain why that's your mix to the person next to you. You got like 2 minutes. Here's the last thing I'm going to say. And this is just because this is a room filled with Nebraska kids, so I have a special place. I don't always say stuff like this. There is something insanely special about our state, and I'm going to tell you why. I travel and I meet kids everywhere, and I promise you, it's literally what I've done for the last 15 years. I felt like I spoke to millennials when they were millennials. I spoke to Gen Z as they've come up. And here's one special thing about kids in Nebraska. Everybody watching online, not that there's no shade on your state, but I'm just going to love on my state here for a second. And so here's why I love you all so much. A lot of us grew up in a town where we had to do everything. You're from a place where there's no stoplight. You know the adults in your town. You've had to do 4 or 5 things even when you didn't want to. That's not an experience that kids in a bigger city or a bigger town always get. And so for some of you, that's what makes you different. But the one thing that I always tell Nebraska kids is you're almost too humble to a fault. Don't be so scared to tell your story. Don't be so scared to show people what you can do. You wouldn't believe how many incredible Nebraskans are doing things around the world and saying that they were from Nebraska and using that got them where they wanted to go. Storytelling is the most powerful thing we do in our lives, and if you can get really, really good at sharing your story, I promise you it can open up a ton of doors for you. I hope you all have a great rest of your conference. Thanks for giving me a little bit of your time. We'll enjoy you guys later. See ya.